And then we have Al-Alim, which is the all-knowing. And why is that relevant here? Why that specific attribute in that context? The reason for that is, just because you've said something with your mouth, that doesn't necessarily truly represent what's in your heart. So God may be all-hearing, He may hear your prayer, but actually He also knows already, even before you've said it, He knows what's in your heart. So can you see that those two attributes are the perfect attributes in the context of this prayer, and why they have the strongest rhetorical impact in that context. Then we move on the story. فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا. Now, Maryam is expecting to have a son, because in those days a daughter would not be a priest in the temple. That was something that only men did. Among the children of Israel, the men would dedicate themselves and lead a life of dedication to God in the temple, and each person would be given a small niche, and they would stay there for many years, and people would come in and bring them food, and they would simply be dedicated to God. So she expected to have a son. But then فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا, lamma means when, وَضَعَ means to give birth. فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا, when she gave birth to her. Yeah? So can you see there that the Quran doesn't take the time to say, and then she gave birth to a daughter. It's not necessary. The surprise that she experienced upon seeing that she's just given birth to a girl is expressed in the structure of the verse itself. And when she gave birth to her, it's like, oh, it's a her. Can you see that? Yep. The first time you hear of the her is after the word to give birth. So it's almost as though the structure of the verse is conveying the surprise that she experienced upon seeing this girl that she's just given birth to. فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْهَا قَالَتْ, she says, Rabbi, my Lord. Again, truncating the ya, endearment. Rabbi, inni, and then again to express her surprise and the emphasis, again, inni, indeed. Inni وَضَعْتُهَا, I have given birth to her. Again, she's referring to the her. She's so surprised, she refers to the feminine pronoun there. I have given birth to her. Untha, a girl. The word untha means a female. I have given birth to her, a female. And then the verse says, Wallahu a'lamu bima wada'at. And the wa here can mean and it can also mean but, and it can also mean even though. The wa is actually quite flexible in its meaning, because she doesn't need to say that to God, that I have given birth to her, a girl. God already knows that. But she's saying that out of surprise. And then the verse says, Wallahu a'lamu bima wada'at. And Allah is more knowing. So the word a'lamu is a superlative, which means, like we say, Allahu Akbaru. Allah is the greatest. So that form, Akbaru, A'lamu, which looks a bit like the first person verb, doesn't it? Like, Af'alu, Adhabu, A'lamu. Actually, if I say A'lamu, means I know. But here, that's not a verb. That's a noun. It looks exactly like the verb, but it's not a verb. It's a noun which is a superlative, which means all-knowing, most knowing. Yeah? So there's another emphasis here on the fact that Allah is omniscient. He already knows. Wallahu a'lamu bima wada'at. Allah is most knowing of what she has given birth to. Yeah, and this expression here is a parenthesis. In Arabic we call it a jumla i'tiradiyya. It's coming in the middle of her speech. So she says, I have given birth to her, a girl, open brackets, and Allah knows, Allah is better knowing of what she has given birth to, close brackets. And then she carries on with her speech, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى. And the male is not like the female. And that's what I want to focus on today. Why at this point in the verse does the Quran say وَلَيْسَ, which is not, الذَّكَر, ذَكَر means male, The word ka in Arabic is a preposition which means like. Yeah? Al-untha. The male is not like the female. Now, it's actually very interesting why the word male is mentioned first. Because would you expect her to say, because she's expecting a son, and she is perhaps disappointed that she's had a daughter, because she's thinking, well, how can my daughter be a priest? And how can my daughter be dedicated to the temple? How can I fulfill my promise? She's surprised because during her pregnancy she sees signs that she has something very special in her tummy. So she thinks, I'm going to have a son, he's going to be special, he's going to be a prophet, he's going to be dedicated in the temple, he's going to be the leader of the people. And then she has a daughter, I've given birth to her. This is her first word, I've given birth to her. And then she says, but the male is not like the female. In that context, would you expect her to actually say, the female is not like the male? That's what you'd expect her to say. And so the scholars of the Qur'an have dug into this and said, why is the Qur'an expressing this in this way? What's the wisdom behind this? Because if you switched it around, the meaning would be the same. If you switch that around, you could still express the same meaning, or one of the nuances of meaning, or express the fact that she is surprised and she's expecting a son. So one of the meanings, or one of the reasons why the dhakar, the male, is mentioned first, is because they've said that was forefront in her mind. Yeah? Not that the male is better than the female, but in her mind, she was expecting a son, so she says the word male first. That's one very simple explanation. Yeah? But the more interesting explanation is this. When you compare two things, when you say X is not like Y, which one is the benchmark? The first or the second? X is not like Y. Which one is the benchmark? X is not like the Y. Yeah? If you have two children and one is really intelligent and the other is not, and you say, so-and-so is not like so-and-so, isn't it? The benchmark, the higher position, comes second in rhetoric when you speak. So the rhetorical impact of placing the female second, even though the meaning, the basic meaning could have been conveyed by putting it the other way around, is that there is something special about the female that isn't there in the male. And so Mary, in her surprise, because she's thinking, I want a son, I'm going to have a son, I'm going to have a son, she says, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, and that's just her intuition. But she was taught those words by God to say it in that way.
You mean the mother of Mary?
Sorry, the mother of Mary, yes. So the wife of Imran. So even though the wife of Imran, she probably didn't think about the rhetorical impact of that when she said it. She had a son in the forefront of her mind. So the first interpretation probably explains why she said it the way she said. However, her words were guided by God and they became enshrined in the Qur'an. And there's a reason for this, because the Qur'an is a message for the rest of mankind, and it will have an impact on how people interpret this and behave until the Day of Judgment. And so we have this structure, لَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, the male is not like the female. Now, why is that important? I'm going to go back to another story from the history of Islam. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Islamic world expanded, it mushroomed out very, very quickly. And so very soon the Muslims were at the gates of Jerusalem. And the Roman garrison that was in Jerusalem, they left before they arrived. So Jerusalem was unguarded. And the Christian patriarch of Jerusalem and the inhabitants of Jerusalem were inside the town. The patriarch came out to the Muslim commander, whose name was Abu Ubaidah, and he said, I will hand over the keys of Jerusalem to you. But I will only do so if the Caliph Omar, if Omar himself comes and receives it from me in person. Yeah? And so Abu Ubaidah, the Muslims were instructed not to shed blood. You're not allowed to have a fight if it's not necessary. And so he sent a messenger to Medina and asked the Caliph Omar to get on a donkey and come all the way to Jerusalem to take the keys of Jerusalem. And so Omar, with his assistant, they start traveling, and there's one donkey, and they alternate on the donkey. So the Caliph, the ruler of almost half of the world, and a servant are taking alternate turns on the donkey as they're traveling towards Jerusalem. When they get to Jerusalem, it's the turn of the servant on the donkey. And so when they get there, everybody thinks that the servant on the donkey is the Caliph, because they wouldn't expect the Caliph to be walking when the servant is on the donkey. But when they get there, they're surprised, because here's a man who's ruler of almost half of the known world at the time, and he's in rags. He doesn't look like a king, and he's walking, and the servant is on the donkey. So the patriarch refuses to give him the key. He says he has to change his clothes. We're not going to do the handover ceremony until the Caliph changes his clothes. And a debate goes on where Omar refuses. He says, no, these are my clothes. You accept me as I am, or I don't receive the keys. But eventually Abu Ubaidah manages to convince him, saying, okay, fine, let's wash your clothes. At least you just come back from a long journey. Let's wash your clothes, and then we can do the ceremony. So they agree. So there's a compromise. Omar receives the keys. They go into Jerusalem. And the time for prayer comes. And they're about to pray with the church in front of them towards Mecca. Yeah? And Omar stops and he says, no, we don't want to pray here. We want to pray on the other side. So he goes around the front of the church with the church behind him and prays towards Mecca. And when he was asked, why have you done that? He said, I was afraid that if I prayed here, generations of Muslims after me would use that as an excuse to usurp the church and take it away. They would say, Omar prayed here, we're going to take away your church, without understanding. So in order to protect the church, he goes around and he prays on the other side. Yeah, and that's a lesson for the rest of time, that you don't usurp someone else's position unjustly. Everybody has a rightful place in the world, and if you take that place away from them, you cause an injustice. So can you see here, if this were put the other way around, some people, some ignorant people might have come along later and said, Allah says in the Quran, وَلَيْسَ الْأُنْثَى كَالذَّكَرِ. The female is not like the female, the male is the benchmark. We're the boss. Yeah, we rule over the females, they have to obey us. Yeah? So even though the same meaning could have been expressed, Allah decided to put words into the mouth of Maryam that would not only express her surprise upon giving birth to a daughter instead of a son, but also be a lesson for the rest of humanity going forward, that there is something special about the female. Do not displace her in your society. Give her her rightful position.